自分自身に挑戦し、新たな可能性を探し、より美しい未来を作ることができるということです。ありがとうございました。
Today, I'm going to be sharing a story that I never thought I would be telling. A story about how I went from knowing absolutely nothing about Japanese to winning a national Japanese speech contest in just 2 years. What does it take to really learn a language? Through my experiences, I found the answer to this question. And in this video, I'll take you through the ups, the downs, the moments of self-doubt, and also the moments of enlightenment where I found out what it truly means to learn a language. So if you ever wanted to learn a language, or you're already learning one, then this video is for you. I'll take you through every step of my journey, what I learned along the way, from the frustrating beginnings to that unforgettable moment of standing up on that stage. So it all started in my last year of high school when I ran out of normal shows to watch on Netflix. And I thought, hey, what about that anime thing my friends have been talking about? It sounds a bit weird, but I'll give it a go. And that was it. It was like I found a gold mine of content that I couldn't get enough of. While watching anime, sometimes I stopped reading the subtitles for a second and I would just listen. And that's when I realized something. This language actually sounds really beautiful. And from there, my interest in Japanese began to blossom. I became more curious in Japanese culture, and eventually I thought, hey, it would be pretty cool if I could speak this language. How hard could it be? And that's when the journeys began. And before I knew it, I had practically given up on learning Japanese. I was paralyzed by the countless amount of apps, textbooks, and grammar guides. I mean, I literally barely even knew what a noun was in English, let alone Japanese. So I just had no clue how to digest all of this information. For the first couple of weeks, instead of actually studying any Japanese, who needs to do that? I just spent my time watching countless how to learn a language guide, trying to find the most effective study method, trying to min-max my approach and plan everything before I even started. But eventually it hit me, wait, I haven't actually learned anything about Japanese yet. And from there I realized it's impossible to actually plan everything out before you even have started. I just needed to start, and then over time, my ideal study method would just form. And that's a point that I'll return to later in my journey. It's that you have to be okay with imperfection. To make real progress, you have to thrive in ambiguity and let time drive your improvement. So yeah, I actually only started learning Japanese after about a month of procrastination, but eventually I got started with the alphabet. And as for kanji and vocabulary, I started my everlasting relationship with Anki. And if you don't know, Anki is an app that uses flashcards and spaced repetition to help you memorize vocabulary or anything you want, really. The only catch being that you have to do your Anki cards every single day. Otherwise, you're gonna wake up with 400 cards and a hefty pile of guilt the next day. However, there was still one thing that sent a shiver down my spine. Grammar. I'm not even joking when I say this. I didn't know what a verb was in English, nor a noun, or an adjective.
Noun.
So the thought of trying to learn grammar in a foreign language seemed impossible to me. And to be honest, it was impossible for me at that time. In fact, it was a complete waste of time even trying. You see, what I didn't know was that you need to immerse yourself in a language to naturally pick up these grammar rules. Back then, nothing made sense, everything was abstract, and even simple concepts were made overly complicated to make Japanese fit into English terms. I hated studying grammar, and that made me hate studying Japanese. I thought if I didn't even enjoy studying it, then what's the point of continuing? Then I found it. Immersion, a method that made me throw away everything I thought I knew about learning languages. No textbooks, no Duolingo, no classrooms, no grammar, just listen. It sounded perfect to me. But wait, how does that even work? How can you just learn a language by listening? How are you supposed to know the difference between what and gut without analyzing the language as if it was a mathematical equation? That's when I learned something crucial. Language is not a maths problem to solve. I mean, think about it. Did you really sit down with a textbook to learn what passive verbs were when you were 2 years old? I mean, at least I didn't. So then, how did we learn our mother tongue? Well, that's what immersion is all about. Replicating how you learned a language as a baby. And that was through lots and lots of listening, and then eventually trying to communicate through goo-goos and gagas until you became fluent. On top of that, I learned about comprehensible input, a method where you understand most of a sentence, but not all of it. For example, if you didn't know English, and I pointed at this piano and said piano, and if I said that enough times, then eventually you would associate that object with the word piano, or at least I hope you would. So just by listening to thousands of hours of comprehensible input, I would be able to build a deep understanding of Japanese. But there was a problem. I still couldn't understand anything, so nothing felt comprehensible. At least nothing that was interesting. The only things I could grasp were videos that felt like they were aimed at 2-year-olds, which are probably very effective for learning a language, but they get boring fast. And as a result, I wasn't able to keep a steady immersion habit. I mean, I want to listen to stories about some guy's head getting chopped off, or, some romance, not about what I put on my toast for breakfast today. That sort of advanced content was way out of my reach. I was still a newborn in language learning terms, and watching some guy's head get chopped off would probably scar me for life. So how did I get around this contradiction? Well, I watched the guy's head getting chopped off anyway. I'm sorry, that was a metaphor, by the way. What I really did was watch Teasing Master Takagi-san, a cute little romance anime. But it was tough, I had to pause at every single sentence and look up 4 to 5 words. And then even when I knew every single word in the sentence, I still didn't understand what they were even trying to say. It was a grueling process. Trying to watch 5 minutes of an episode took about 30 minutes of my time, and eventually my motivation plummeted, and I found myself in a dark place, caught between not advanced enough to enjoy complex content and being bored with basic input. I was stuck in an upper beginner rut and had no clue how to progress. But then I realized I don't need to search up every single word in a sentence if it's gonna make watching a show a chore. It's better just to let it flow and enjoy myself. And it comes back to that point. Ambiguity is okay. Put away that pop-up dictionary, man. This realization was massive, and it enabled me to start immersing like I never had before. It meant I could start listening to podcasts even if I didn't understand everything. I could start watching anime even if I could barely follow what the story was actually about. Sure, it's not exactly comprehensible input, but comprehensible input is not everything. I learned that striking a balance between getting comprehensible input and actually enjoying yourself is the key, because I realized that the most important metric to improving in a language is time spent inputting. Remember Anki, my one and only true love? Well, Anki betrayed me and sent me spiraling down into another plateau, one that would take me months to break out of. Over time, the reviews have been slowly piling up until some days I was doing Ankis for over an hour and a half. Anki became the only thing I did in relation to Japanese every day, and it burnt me out. Even though I knew it'd probably be better to be immersing during that time, I couldn't possibly stop my Anki routine. I'd been doing them for months, every single day. I was a Anki addict. I missed out on countless hours of immersion for the sake of keeping up with my Ankis. After a few months of this, I finally came to a conclusion. I needed to lower my Anki intake or put a cap on it. No shit, Sherlock. By the time I figured that out, I was already burnt out. My motivation to get any input was non-existent. I was only able to continue Japanese by doing the bare bone basic routine that I had established. Now this is something unrelated to Japanese, but it had a profound effect on how quickly I was able to learn the language. It allowed me to start immersing for over 8 hours in some days. This is where I felt my skills skyrocket. What could have such a dramatic effect on my journey? Well, the key was dropping video games and social media. I've already made a video about this, so I won't go too far into detail, but in short, this changed, increased my ability to enjoy learning, improved my focus. It made me feel like the amount of time I had in the day doubled. But most of all, I fell in love with learning. So it's something I'd recommend to everyone. I had decided to go to Japan in a couple of months, and then it hit me. I actually hadn't spoken a single word of Japanese to another human being other than myself. You might be thinking, how could you not even speak a single word in your first full year of learning a language? But I'm actually glad I didn't. This decision surprisingly made my spoken Japanese a lot more natural than it otherwise would have been, which I'll explain later. When I finally felt like I was ready to start speaking, I booked a 30-minute conversation lesson with a teacher on a website called italki. I really had no idea what was going to happen during that lesson. I was nervous and scared that the over 1,000 hours I'd spent immersing in Japanese would amount to absolutely nothing when I actually opened my mouth. If my blind faith in the immersion method was going to work, this was the moment of truth. Man, I still remember the feeling before that first lesson. I was sweating and I wanted to run, but I stuck it out and I was okay. I could have a conversation, albeit a basic one, filled with lots of mistakes and moments where I was searching for a word that I would never find. But overall, I was relieved that I wasn't at zero, but I was also painfully aware of how far I still had left to go in my journey. From then on, I started having regular hour-long conversation sessions 3 times a week. And this is when I began to really appreciate waiting a year before I started speaking. After all that input, speaking felt like I was putting the final pieces of the puzzle together. Words and sentences started to just flow out of my mouth, and I think the most important thing that I realized was that speaking is literally just copying what you've heard before. I also noticed another benefit of delaying my output. My pronunciation wasn't bad, and the teachers noticed this too. Finding that the fruits of my labors had paid off, I was very happy. But I didn't know that soon my confidence would come crushing down in a matter of seconds. And I was off to Japan, excited to flex my Nihongo skills, and most of all, I was eager to get my first "Jouzu desu ne," and then it happened. My first conversation in real life, one I still remember vividly to this day. After a 12-hour flight with, of course, no sleep, I was exhausted and struggling to figure out where to go with my train ticket. So I built up some confidence and went to a stranger to ask for some help. How do you think that conversation went? Yeah, it was trash. The guy legit sounded like he was rapping. If you've learned a foreign language, I'm sure you can relate. You realize that people speak hella fast, and it was a harsh reality check. How could my comprehension be so low after all this time I've invested? Just like that, my confidence went to zero. As the trip continued, I had more conversations with varying levels of success. I got Jouzu'd a few times. Every conversation that wasn't a complete failure brought me a feeling that I had never experienced before. A wholesome satisfaction knowing that I had put in the work to reach this level. That feeling alone makes learning languages worth it. But there's always those 7-Eleven employees ready to bring you straight back down to earth. Going to Japan gave me a massive motivation boost, which I took back home and immersed more than I ever had before. But this motivation was soon killed by what I call the monster of language learning. Learning a language at school. Most of us have done it at some point. Most of us end up hating it, myself included. So why did I willingly enroll in a Japanese class at university? It's a question I still ask myself to this day. My experience during this period seriously makes me question how anyone actually learns a language through traditional school. I mean, does anyone actually enjoy language class? Like, I'm actually curious, so please let me know in the comments below. I'm not saying it's impossible to learn a language this way, but I do think you're making it harder on yourself. In fact, it might even be hurting your progress. In my case, it sucked the fun out of learning language. Let me just say, it's not the teacher's fault. They were great. The issue I had lies with the traditional language learning method itself. We were given a textbook, Genki. Innocent me was actually kind of curious and excited to try out a different way of learning and to give it a go. But that curiosity dissipated in an instant when I started working through the book. Not only are the examples unnatural, but of course it's grammar focused. I went back to feeling like language is a maths equation again. You know, if X then Y, but if Y then Z, and only Z if X is equal to 1, but plus 2, and then you can do Z if you feel like it. Huh? Japanese class gets worse when you realize you're in a room with only one native Japanese speaker. I mean, how does that actually make any sense? You end up practicing Japanese with someone who, like you, is trying to learn the language. But what this actually does is hinder your improvement and reinforces bad habits by creating a sort of echo chamber effect. I mean, it's better than nothing, yeah, but don't you think it's extremely ineffective? Anyway, I could rant about this for a while, but maybe that's a topic for another video. These problems, coupled with the assignments and piles of homework, killed my love for learning the language. And that's why I called it the monster of language learning, at least for me. But there was one redeeming factor about learning language at university. I was given the opportunity to enter a speech competition. I joined the speech competition without any goals or expectations. Honestly, I don't even know why I entered, but I'm glad I did because it didn't just improve my Japanese. But first I had a problem. How do I even write a whole script in Japanese? I hadn't written anything in Japanese before, except for in the Genki textbooks. I knew I was in for a long ride. Eventually I decided to speak about some experience I had while I was in Japan and somehow link it to a heroic message about how you should forge your own path in life and blah blah blah. I'd love to know how many hours I spent staring at my monitor, lost in the abyss of kanji, trying to grasp that next word that should come in the sentence. But those hours were worth it. Those hours produced something incredible. Something that would go down in the history books of Japanese literature. Yes, my script. Except it was still trash. Thankfully, my kind teachers helped iron out the mistakes. Before I knew it, the day had come. Judgment Day. My mind was full of doubts. What if I forget a word? Did I really put enough time into this? Is my Japanese even good enough? Once I stepped into the room, these doubts disappeared. I remembered all the work I had put in, from week 0 through the ups and the downs, and I knew that I had done my best. As I listened to others present their speeches, I felt a sense of peace inside. There was nothing else I could do now but be in the present moment. Then my name was called. You know, I actually made a point that when I got on stage, I would just stop, look at the audience, and smile for a few seconds. It was a surreal feeling. I was really standing there, about to give a speech in a language that was completely foreign to me just 2 years ago. I took a deep breath and left the rest to muscle memory.
皆さん、こんにちは。何があるか興味を持ちました。そして書いたらまるで別の世界に足を踏み入れるような感覚がしました。大きく青空にあふれる太陽の輝きは幻想的な古い竹やぶを下し、刻印した小さい人種の山に光を灯していました。
It was a 4-minute speech, yet it felt like seconds. The audience clapped, I sat down, but most of all, I was relieved. I knew I had put my all out on that stage, but I still wasn't expecting what would come next. The judges began to reveal the winner one by one, from 4th place to 1st, 4th, not me, 3rd, not me, 2nd, not me. And those seconds between the announcement of 1st and 2nd place felt endless. My heart was pounding. I thought, ah shit, either I've won the whole competition or I get absolutely nothing. I remember that moment so vividly. A mix of disbelief and joy. But the thing I remember most is clenching my fist like this and walking up onto the podium with everyone's eyes on me. Even though I'm an introvert, damn, it felt good. So guys, I actually have something to tell you. The truth is, what I showed you actually wasn't the national competition. Wait. I didn't lie to you. The national competition, which is normally held in Sydney, was unfortunately cancelled. They still hadn't changed their regulations from COVID period. I went on to win it as well, but yeah, it was a bit disappointing. I still can't believe that I went from someone who was just playing video games every single day, hours on end, to winning a speech contest in a language that I didn't know a single word of 2 years before. It showed me that learning a language is not hard. Not hard in the same way maths is hard. It doesn't take a genius to solve. It just requires you to show up and do a little bit every single day. Now it's been over a year and a half since that speech competition, and I'm still learning Japanese. Looking back on my skills then, man, I was trash. I mean, if future me looked back on my skills right now, I would say the same thing. I think it really goes to show that learning a language is a never-ending process, but it's one of the most fulfilling things that I think you can do in your life. There will be moments of self-doubt, embarrassment, also moments of accomplishment. Learning Japanese changed my life, and it can change yours too. You just need to start. Start now.